In this video, I will be showing you how to set up overtime in Employer on the Go. Depending on the level of access granted by your payroll company, you may or may not have access to all the features discussed in this video. This feature in Employer on the Go is set up for the purpose of calculating overtime on an employee's check. On the main dashboard page, you'll begin by selecting Company, then Setup, then Overtime Setup. Another window will open. You'll notice, even on a brand new company, there is an overtime group present. And that's because when you click on Add Company to add a company to the system creates a standard overtime group by default. Because every employee record has to have an overtime group attached to it. It'll create it by default, and then you can change it from there. But it will create a default for you. All right, so let's see what it creates. So I'm going to highlight the existing group here and click on Edit, and it'll open it up so we can see what's in the guts of the record. The overtime group name defaults in as standard, but you could change it, basic, regular, whatever you want it to be, maybe California, because they have a whole new way of doing, or a whole different way of doing overtime than the rest of the country. Work week begins. It's only mandatory if it's a semi-monthly or monthly client, and that's because the pay period for those types of hourly employees can be different than the work week. So the system has to know the difference so it can properly calculate the overtime. End date. You can put an overtime end date here, or just don't assign it to anybody. And that really will effectively end the overtime. In this Details tab, it defaults to have a level of 1, period of 40 hours, and a rate, time and a half. The period that it's talking about is in the bottom left corner here under overtime period. This calc method that defaults in is average pay, and then you come over to the side and tell the system, do I want to include vacation, sick, holiday, commission, or bonus in that average pay overtime calculation? And that could differ depending on the client. This overtime setup adheres to the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the majority of your clients will probably just leave it as is. If you have California, you're going to have to edit this existing line, add 8 to the day hours, and add a second line, level 2, with period hours of 12 and a rate of 2, because they have to pay out double time. They work 12 consecutive hours. California also utilizes the 7th field because they have a double time rule if you're working 7 consecutive days. If you needed to, you could click on this little pencil to open up this level, change it to whatever you need to change it to, and then click that little check to update. Or if you needed to add a brand new record to level 2, for example, you just click there to add record. To cancel the record, if you don't need it, you just click the X. That'll close it back up. Now, underneath this details box, there's Saturday and Sunday. So mainly timekeeping clients. Maybe you have a timekeeping client that when they work Saturdays, they get time and a half, or Sundays, they get double time. And I'm just mentioning timekeeping. The system would have to know that it was a Saturday or a Sunday to pick up this overtime. So you could put it in as 1.5 or 2. Holiday would be if every employee in the company got the same holiday rate, time and a half or whatever it is, and every employee in the company had this overtime group, I would just put the overtime factor right here, 1.5 or whatever it is. And then when the overtime group is assigned to the employee, it's automatically in there, and everyone will have the same setup. we have overtime period, which always defaults to weekly. There's a biweekly choice available. I believe that's Nevada. And while the calculation method does default to average pay, there's other choices. Average pay by week, that was part of the custom code we wrote involving the biweekly overtime period. Highest department worked, that just means if I have a $10, $15, and $20 rates, and I make overtime, it's going to do the overtime on the highest paid department, which in this case would be the 20. And it would calculate my overtime based on that rate. Pay where earned, that'll look at what my rate is in the department that I earned the overtime and do time and a half of whatever that rate is. Average pay by fluctuating work week was a custom code we did. This is based on the U.S. Department of Labor law that allows overtime calculations based on a fluctuating work week for salary non-exempt employees. So if you have a company that maybe they work 45 hours one week, 35 hours the other week, and that's what they always work, and they have to also meet other requirements of the Department of Labor regulations. For example, the employer has to pay a fixed salary every week. That doesn't vary based on the number of hours worked. And the employer and the employee have to share a clear mutual understanding that the employer will pay this fixed salary regardless of the number of hours worked. And that salary has to at least equal minimum wage. There are no specific rules written on the ratio of hours worked, and it's at the discretion of the Department of Labor. It's designed to be a win-win for the employer and the employee. If you have an employer that wants to use this calculation method, we strongly recommend that you consult the Department of Labor before implementing to ensure that you qualify for it. If you have hourly employees, their overtime calculations will follow the average pay by work week method when the average pay by fluctuating work week calculation method is selected. All right, and then once you make all of your choices, you click on Save. And then on the Employees Pay Information tab, the overtime group is assigned. You can have as many overtime groups as you want per client, but each employee record can only have one overtime group assigned to it.